This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
It's showtime, folks. It's episode 7 of Game On, presented by Knack here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor coming to you for another jam-packed show. Hank, welcome. How are you?
As usual, I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself, Johnny?
I'm doing great. I'm excited. We've got a lot of sports to discuss. And, this time of the year, it seems like ever since we started this show, we've always had a lot to discuss. And today's going to be no exception. As you can tell, Hank and I representing our Giants, Giants pride, even through the tough times. But, obviously it is NFL draft week, and we are going to spend a good amount of time discussing the draft, which gets going this Thursday in just a couple of moments. But, folks, of course, several ways to get aboard as we are presented by Knack. You can tweet at us at GameOnETB on Twitter. Also follow us there on Facebook, facebook.com/GameOnETB, and also on Instagram, GameOn_ETB. And you can see right there across the bottom line our own personal Twitter handles as well. So, Hank, as I said, we've got a lot to get to as always. We will get into the NBA playoffs, and wow, there is a lot to discuss there, whether it's been the Nets who got swept last night at the hands of the Celtics, the Ben Simmons drama, the future of that team, the NBA playoffs in general. There seems to be a constant theme, and that is key injuries to key players. So we'll get into that. We got some baseball to discuss as Miguel Cabrera joined the 3,000 hit club. But obviously, Hank, as you can tell, we are Giants fans. It is NFL draft week, and that's where we're going to kick things off here with on this show. And this is a very interesting draft, and we'll get into all that in a second. But let me first, as we get it started here, the NFL draft is just 2 days away, and joining us on the show to preview the NFL draft from not only a Giants perspective, but also from a football perspective, is the co-host of Review and Preview, and Hank, your co-host over at Big Blue Avenue, and that is my good buddy Tom Scavetta. Tom, welcome. How are you?
Morning, guys. It's draft week. How's it going? Johnny, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely, Tom. I'm doing great, and thank you so much for joining us. So, Tom, I was saying to Hank before the show and, in these couple of weeks leading up to the draft starting this Thursday that, I'm excited as a Giants fan because I think there's a bunch of different ways that we could go here with the 5th and the 7th pick overall. If you've been following with the mock drafts, I know you've had your own mock draft as well. They've been linked to several different players. I know who I particularly like, but we know that the Giants need help on both sides of the ball. But when you look at this draft, it is a very big lineman draft. But where do you think the best player at number 5 for the Giants right now?
The best player at number 5 for the Giants. Now, I think we could all agree the consensus is you want to fill the right tackle void at number 5 overall. I think Evan Neal is the best lineman in this draft, not because of his high floor, but his versatility. When he played at Alabama, he was originally a left guard. His sophomore year played at right tackle, and then this past year played at left tackle. So he has the versatility to play anywhere on the offensive line. So I like his versatility. I think he can slide in and play that right tackle position beautifully. The only question is, what's Houston going to do at number 3, right? Because they could go either way. They could go lineman. They could go defense. So the ideal pick at number 5 is absolutely Evan Neal if he is still on the board.
Yeah, certainly. And then, you look down to number 7, and I think there's a couple of ways the Giants could go at 7 here. And that could be, either another offensive player. They talked about defensive player, whether it's Gardner or even Thibodeau if he falls down that far, which I don't think he's going to. Or I even have thought of the possibility of the Giants even trading that 7th pick, of course, for the right package. But considering where the Giants are, with their team, and even looking ahead to next year, because there's still no guarantee with Daniel Jones's future, I'm not against trading that 7th pick overall. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I'm not against either, and I've spoken with Hank about this numerous times. Joe Shane is open to all options, right? You want to trade back, fine, but you need the right partner to do it, and you need the right return. If the Giants are going to trade back, I want at least 2 early picks. I want to pick later on in the first round, and then I want to pick early to mid second round on top of 36. So the way I look at it is if you trade back, you can go after a Jordan Davis, a guy who fills a gaping hole at defensive tackle. If you stick at number 7 overall, if the Jets don't take Sauce Gardner, that's the pick because you need to fill the cornerback hole. Wink Martindale mentioned his press man scheme. You want to blitz the quarterback, you need good coverage. And let's face it, majority of sacks in the NFL are coverage sacks. So with the rumors about James Bradbury possibly departing, clearing up some cap space, you want to bring in Sauce Gardner at number 7. But unfortunately, I feel like he's too good to pass up if you're the Jets at number 4 overall. Now, my second option is if they do go Sauce Gardner, a guy who I think is going to slip down to number 7 is Kayvon Thibodeau, right? For some reason, guys don't like him. Like Dan Campbell doesn't like him. There's discrepancy about who Jacksonville wants to take at number 1, whether it's Hutchinson or Walker. So it leaves Kayvon Thibodeau because – in my personal opinion, yes, the Jets could take him at 4, but I think he's not afraid of the big market. Carolina, don't think they'll take him at 6. I think they'll go either quarterback or Charles Cross. Not to mention, if the Giants do stick at number 7, Cross could be an option if we go elsewhere at number 5 because the Giants are in love with him as well. But the ideal scenario would be to get Neal at 5 and then Gardner at 7. But in my mock draft, I have the Jets taking Gardner, so I have Kayvon Thibodeau falling to number 7 overall to the New York Football Giants, which just seems so far-fetched, but we've seen this before, guys. There's this big-name guy every year that just falls. And I think if he's there at number 7, I don't know if you guys agree, he has to – I mean, Joe Shane literally has to run to the podium and make that pick himself.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely a Thibodeau guy too. Another guy who I really like watching on film. And again, Tom, like you alluded to, if this is a guy who can really play well in the New York market and he wants to thrive there, I don't see what the big deal, why you would even consider passing on him.
No, I agree. I think he's really good. He's more of a 4-eye, if you ask me, but he can play the 5-tech position as well, which is something the Giants might look to do. You look at the defensive line right now. It's Dexter Lawrence and it's Leonard Williams. That's it. They don't have a nose tackle, right? They were unable to replace Dalvin Tomlinson efficiently last year. Austin Johnson was okay, but he left for the LA Chargers. Danny Shelton was a failed experiment. So now you're looking at who could potentially fill in that void. You could move Lawrence inside to the nose tackle position and put Thibodeau on the opposite side of Leonard Williams, and then there's your 3-down line, right? And I'd be fine with that. But, I mean, we'll definitely see what happens. I'm not so sure what the Giants are going to do because of the new regime. If Gettleman was GM, I feel like we'd have more of an idea of where the Giants are going here. But with Joe Shane and Brian Dable in command, you could only guess, right? I mean, we're 2-3 days out. Who knows?
Absolutely. Tom Scavetta from Review and Preview and Big Blue Avenue joining us here on the show. Tom, just keeping it on the Giants here for a moment. There's been reports this week about Kadarius Toney being possibly shopped, or even, Slayton even being a possibility of being dealt. What are your thoughts about possibly, those guys being rumored to be dealt, and are you against that?
So I'll start with Toney first, if that's okay. 7 injuries last year to 7 different body parts, 2 times on the COVID list, 2 positive COVID tests, and quite frankly, he just couldn't stay on the football field. There's been a lot of drama with him. I'm not going to call out any reporters, but the original source of that report, very unreliable source, so I'm not buying these Kadarius Toney trade rumors. Financially, it does not make sense. Maybe in a year or 2 it could, because obviously he's not a Joe Shane guy. He did report to camp on Saturday, or voluntary mini camp, the voluntary workouts. So I think right now there's downtime. There's not much to talk about with the Giants. So somebody was looking for a story that they could pick on and get clicks, and that's what happened there with Kadarius Toney. However, Is there truth that Joe Shane is taking calls on him? Sure. I think Joe Shane mentioned he's open to all options, right? But I don't think trading Kadarius Toney is a smart move at all. I'm not really buying that one. However, I am buying that Darius Slayton is more of an option to be moved, and here's why. Again, player who struggled to get on the field, 5th-round pick who turned out to be an above-average player for us in his rookie year. Fortunately, the last 2 years have not been that. So I don't know what his value would be. He would clear up a little bit of cap room if you were to deal him. I don't think he'll be traded on draft night. I think if you want to deal him, you deal him closer to the start of the season, being that he is entering a contract year. So whoever would be the recipient of this trade will only be getting him for 1 year anyway. Then you'd have to make a decision on him. And now with the restructure of Sterling Shepard, or more of a pay cut is what I should say, it leaves you thinking, what's the future of this Giants wide receiver room? Are they trying to draft a wide receiver at 36 overall? Can they take one in the 3rd round? Sky Moore has been an option. Watson as well, I think out of North Dakota, something like that. So there are guys out there who could be relevant receivers for the Giants that could fit what Brian Daboll is looking for in his offense. So I think there's not much truth to the Kadarius Toney rumor. Darius Slayton, there might be a little bit more truth, but neither are happening anytime soon.
Absolutely. Take away, Hank. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, Slayton, I agree with. I think after that really good season, it was just a shame that he really struggled to stay on the field. And I think that drop in the Washington game, I really felt bad for him too, because he was another guy that, Tom, I know you and I pretty much thought he was going to be a diamond in the rough. And didn't we compare him to well-dressed Amani Toomer? You knew I had to quote Berman on you guys.
We interviewed a license plate guy about a year ago who is probably the biggest Giants fan that I know. And he loved our reference of Darius Slayton to Amani Toomer. You know,
yes, that was awesome.
Similar build, and Slayton's smaller than he looks. He's only 6'1". He plays like he's 6'2", 6'3". He plays a lot bigger. He is a deep threat, but Giants drafted Toomer in round 2. They drafted Slayton in round 5. So there's the comparison for you. There's a huge drop off. Toomer played at Michigan. Slayton played at Auburn. So again, both good college schools, but unfortunately, Slayton hasn't done much. It did take Toomer a little bit to get his footing with the Giants as well. He was overshadowed by Ike Hilliard for a little bit, despite being drafted before him in 1996. So I'm kind of at odds right now at what the Giants are going to do at wide receiver. But Joe Shane, they're retooling a few players. But guys, this is the closest thing the Giants have seen to a full rebuild in quite some time.
Yep. And by the way, as far as Kadarius Toney goes, I also happen to agree with Tom. The idea of trading away a first-round wide receiver after what really was a rough season for him due to things really mostly out of his control, I think the idea of that happening is kind of ridiculous too. So just wanted to put that out there as well.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I mean, when you come to the draft, you always, hear rumors and speculation before the draft. And like you said, if the right package was out there, you could consider it. But I agree. I don't think they're going to shop Toney at all. But when you look at the draft now, top down, there have been a lot of mock drafts from a lot of people. Tom, I know you guys have done a mock draft over on your show. So who do you have as the number 1 overall pick? Because now we're starting to see some different names up there at the top.
Well, Khan wants Hutchinson, and it's not a full guarantee because there's chaos there in the front office. One guy wants Hutchinson, the other guy wants Walker. Trayvon Walker going number 1 overall is all smoke. It's going to be Aiden Hutchinson come draft night. He'll be the number 1 overall pick. I mean, the season he had at Michigan was outstanding. I mean, he elevated them to the college football playoff, a team with a pedestrian quarterback that relied heavily on their running game, needed a great defense. You had the combination of him and David Ojabo, which were outstanding this season, not to mention Daxton Hill in the secondary was very solid as well at that 3rd level. So you're kind of looking at what he can provide to Jacksonville and what Jacksonville needs. I feel like Trayvon Walker really had just this one insane season, as where Hutchinson has been consistently getting better throughout the years. So he would be my number 1 overall pick because he's a game changer for Jacksonville. As where Trayvon Walker, he's not as sure of a thing, which is crazy for me to say because he played on that Georgia Bulldogs defense, which was ranked number 1 in the nation in a lot of categories last year. So, but I'm going Hutchinson.
Yeah, I agree. I've watched his games at Michigan, and I think he is the number 1 talent overall. And I agree with you. I think it's just all smoke when it comes to Walker. Not to take anything away from him, but I think Hutchinson works there at number 1. Tom, the other New York team in town, the Jets, also have a lot of interesting options at 4 and 10. There have been reports that they're not willing to get rid of that 10th pick. They weren't when Tyreek Hill was available. Even now with Deebo Samuel being out there, Jets could be an option, but they don't seem like they want to trade that 10th overall pick. So we've heard what you think about 4, but what do you think 4 and 10 overall for the Jets? Where do they go?
Yeah, I think the Jets are smart, like you mentioned. They're taking Sauce at number 4, although I wouldn't put it past them to get Kayvon Thibodeau as well. I think it's time to get a defensive player in there, a defensive game changer player, which is something they don't have. I think that's the pick at number 4. I would lean Sauce. Number 10, look, it's tough because you drafted Cross won't be there at 10. I think he's going to Seattle at 9. I personally think they need to go wide receiver. I really do. They need somebody. Denzel Mims is not the answer. They have good players. They just lost Jamison Crowder. I mean, they still have Elijah Moore, and I'm forgetting the other receiver they have who's quite decent. But
Braxton Berrios, they signed him.
That's the other one, right? But you need somebody opposite of Elijah Moore. Who is that player going to be? When I look at receivers that fit their scheme, I'm looking at 2 players. I'm looking at Garrett Wilson and Drake London. I'm looking at Garrett Wilson because what he was able to do at Ohio State. I mean, in my opinion, he's the pure number 1 wide receiver in this draft. You can't go wrong with an Ohio State wide receiver, in my personal opinion. Now you look at Drake London. Everyone's like, oh, Pac-12 receiver. That can't be the first receiver off the board. But Drake London he's an insane specimen, we like to call him. He's huge. He's a legitimate red zone threat, something the Jets could need to help out Zach Wilson. So if I had to pick between Wilson and London, I would lean Wilson. But you have to remember, what are the Falcons going to do at number 8? They're decimated in the receiving core. Are they going to go quarterback? Are they going to go wide receiver? Because right now their number 1 is Zacchaeus. They could, in my opinion, the Falcons should address receiver in the 2nd round. But at this time, I have the Jets taking Garrett Wilson at number 10 overall. And unfortunately, I think Sauce is going at 4. If the Jets are smart, and Joe Douglas has proved to be that so far, unfortunately, that division is just manifest, right? It's tough for them to do anything when you have teams like the Bills, the Patriots, and the Dolphins. And when you look at what the Jets have to go up against coverage-wise in that division, you have Tyreek Hill now on Miami Dolphins entering the division. You have Devontae Parker heading to the New England Patriots along with Jacoby Myers. You have Stephon Diggs on the Buffalo Bills along with Gabriel Davis. Gabriel Davis erupted in that playoff game last year. How are Bryce Hall and DJ Reed going to compare about those guys? Not very well. The Jets must take Ahmad Sauce Gardner at number 4 overall, in my opinion, because they do have a decent D-line with Quinnen Williams, John Franklin Myers. I mean, they have Carl Lawson, who's a decent pass rusher. So I think they could wait. They shouldn't go Thibodeau. Sauce at 4, Wilson at 10.
That makes a lot of sense. Another big thing that gets talked about during the draft are trades, Tom. And what possible deals? I see one for Carolina, but what possible trade do you see, if any, going down on day 1 for any team?
It's tough, right? Because this year, this quarterback class is not as eye-popping. I think I'm not the biggest fan of this quarterback class, but I think people are Debbie Downing it just a little bit too much. There is potential here. I do like Matt Corral a lot. Unfortunately, his injury really hurt him. I think it's more about teams trading back this year than teams trading up. Last year, we were on a show, and I made a prediction that the Bears were going to trade up to get a quarterback. and that happened to be true. So unfortunately, it was with the Giants because of what happened with the pick before between Dallas and Philly. But I think this year, I don't see teams trading up for a quarterback. I don't think it would be smart to take a quarterback any pick before number 6 at Carolina if the Panthers really do want Kenny Pickett. And if that's the route they want to go, fine. But I think it's more about teams trading back, Johnny. I think the Giants are a real possibility to trade back. I know Atlanta has a lot of draft picks already. If they want to trade back from number 8, they can, but that number 8 pick is a valuable one. I'm trying to think of who else is really up there that could trade back, because I think Houston, I don't know who they really like at number 3. I think they might go Icky, but I'm not so sure. If you want to talk about a team trading up, it could be the Pittsburgh Steelers. If they really want a guy like a Willis or a Ritter, who I'm not very high on Willis due to his competition level in college. But I do think that there are some teams out there that could potentially trade up. Watch out for the New Orleans Saints as well. And I think they're at number 16. There's rumors that Pickett could fall down to them as well if Carolina doesn't go quarterback. So I'm intrigued to see what happens. But I think watch out for teams, like the Pittsburgh Steelers, like the Atlanta Falcons in regards to trading back. And there was one other I just said. I can't remember it off the tip of my tongue. But, yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the main team that I'm looking at to see if they potentially trade up.
Yeah, and I think also because you have so many teams that have multiple first-round picks this year, that's why you could hear the rumors of. I'll throw one out at you that I kind of thought about in the car ride last week, and that was when Deebo Samuel was being rumored to be shopped around. I know that John Lynch said that he doesn't see the possibility of that happening. But on the Panthers, I had maybe the worst quarterback situation in the NFL last season. I would be looking into talking to San Francisco and trying to get not only Deebo, but Jimmy Garoppolo over there. Because Garoppolo really is damaged goods right now coming off that injury, and you really don't know where you're going to be. So if I'm the Panthers, I'd be calling up John Lynch over there in San Francisco and seeing what you want to get Deebo and Garoppolo over there and changing the way that team is. Because if you get both of those guys on that team, you know what, you become a playoff contender with how weak the NFC is in general, especially that NFC South outside of the Buccaneers.
Now, I don't really understand why Deebo wants out of San Francisco. You just made the NFC Championship game with Jimmy G. You had a career year there. The offensive line is outstanding. You have another great receiver across from him in Brandon Ayuk, who is very talented as well. And you have George Kittle. Why would you want to leave that situation and potentially head to a team like the Carolina Panthers? I don't really understand it. Yes, Mike McDaniel just left for Miami. Maybe he wants to go there, but they already have Waddle and Hill. Doesn't really make sense. So where could Samuel be headed? I'm not so sure. Haven't really thought too much into this because, again, it's easy to want to trade out, but the hard part is finding a trade partner. Again, maybe the New Orleans Saints, maybe the Saints need a receiver. I mean, they desperately need one, right? They're linked to Chris Olave mid-first round, so maybe they go and get Deebo Samuel. And I like the point you bring up, Johnny. Garoppolo and Samuel, the only issue I have with that is who's going to bite on that? Are they going to bite on that because they already traded for Darnold last year? That didn't work. Are they going to trade for a quarterback again? I think they're better off drafting a quarterback because Matt Rule really, his tenure as the Panthers head coach relies on the development of a young quarterback. I don't know if a 29, 30-year-old Jimmy G coming in is really going to give Carolina the answer that they need. Although I won't completely argue against that point you made. I feel like there's other options out there for Deebo that would make a lot more sense. Kansas City as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because that Kansas City, I know this is a big wide receiver draft, but the Chiefs were another one that I was thinking of possibly trading up. And I know they've got 2 late first rounders. And this, again, is a very big wide receiver draft too. But they could be somebody that moves up to try and get a receiver, maybe even like a Drake London, like you said, if they wanted to make that big of a push. Because, it's crazy because a lot of people are downplaying the Chiefs And I understand why, because if you look in depth why, but I still think they have the best quarterback in that division too. So that's an interesting team to watch as well.
Yeah, no, if they get him, that would definitely lessen the blow for them of losing Tyreek Hill. Could even make the argument that it might be like maybe an upgrade, because I've often said that Debo was one of the most underrated receivers in the league, and you look at that speed. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the AFC West right now, and the Chiefs could potentially use him. Imagine the Raiders get him, throw him in there with Renfro and Devontae Adams. I mean, I feel like the AFC West could be where he's headed because he won't have to travel that far from San Francisco, and that division is already stacked as it is. So if I had betting odds on that, it would probably be the AFC West. The Chargers as well, they could use a guy opposite. I know they just re-signed Mike Williams, but again, the NFL nowadays, it's a passing league. You want 3 good receivers on your roster. And with the way that division is trending, you need weapons, right? So I do think people are downplaying the Chiefs a little bit. I still think they have an outstanding team. They rebuilt their offensive line, which is nice. Unfortunately, Kelsey's getting a little bit older, but he's shown no signs of regression by any means. And they just brought in Juju. They brought in Valdez-Scantling. They do have Mecole Hardman. And we know anybody in the Chiefs' offensive system just so happens to flourish. And not to mention, they still have Eric Bieniemy there. So that combination of him and Andy Reid is still intact. So can you really bet against the Chiefs winning the division in the AFC West? I don't think so yet, because you have a first-year coach in Vegas. You have a first-year coach in Denver. You have a second-year coach in LA, the Chargers, who made some questionable calls last year, a little bit too liberal as far as going for it on 4th down. There's a lot of questions with those other 3 teams. The only question with Kansas City is them losing Tyreek Hill. Is that really going to hurt them that much as far as winning the division? I'm not so sure. I would love to see another team win that division, but if Deebo Samuel goes to Kansas City, man, I think it's pretty much a lock.
I agree. I think a lot of people are downplaying the Chiefs way too quick. And let's just remember, again, as I said, they do have the best quarterback of those 4 in that division, and that's going to mean a lot as well.
And potentially the best center in football that fell to them in the 2nd round last year.
Absolutely. Yep. It's crazy because, the AFC has like 10 Pro Bowl quarterbacks, and some of them are not going to make the playoffs next season. It's just that stacked. And, when the schedule gets released on May the 12th, I think you're going to see a lot of Sunday night and Monday night AFC West matchups for sure. But, as I said, this draft is going to be very, very interesting, not only from a local angle for our Giants, but as a whole, because, really, it's not a quarterback draft. It's a lineman draft. It's a wide receiver draft. So a bunch of ways that a bunch of different teams can go. And I know we'll be glued into it here, and I know you'll be glued into it as well, Tom. And thanks so much for giving us out. Of course, Tom Scavetta, the host of Review and Preview, which you can check out Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Review and Preview Sports Network, and also the co-host along with Hank on Big Blue Avenue. Tom, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes here today, and enjoy the draft, and we'll definitely have you back on again real soon, all right?
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much. You guys have a great show going for you. Really appreciate it. And I'll be conversing with you guys come draft night as to who we select. So really appreciate it. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll be locked in for sure. Thank you, Tom.
Tom, always a pleasure, my guy.
Take care.
All right. Very good. That's Tom Scavetta from Review and Preview and Big Blue Avenue. Thanks to him for joining us and giving us a good half hour there as we get set for the draft. And Hank, like I said, I agree with him. I definitely could see that's the direction the Giants are going in. I wouldn't be surprised they trade down, and I wouldn't be surprised if other guys fell into them as well. You got a lot of options, and you know what? For a team that's still rebuilding like the Giants are, I wouldn't be against any of those guys. And I do trust this administration over the Gettleman's administration for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I'm definitely with you. I have been thinking for quite some time that the Giants were probably going to trade that number 7 pick to whoever and then get like a 1st round pick for the next year. Because I think if you've talked enough Giants with me, You know my thoughts on Daniel Jones, and make no mistake, I'm a supporter of Daniel Jones, but I'm not 100% sure that he is going to be the guy going forward to lead the Giants in the future. But with that being said, if they decided to use that 7th pick on, say, Kayvon Thibodeau, let's say we're even lucky enough for him to fall that far, then I would absolutely take it. There's really not a wrong answer like you alluded to. So I definitely agree. And I think I can safely say one way or another, even though I'm going to be honest with you, I am still a little bit nervous about this draft because, I mean, look, I've seen a lot of bad drafts from this team for years past. Thanks, Dave Gettleman, and thank you, Jerry Reese. At the same time, I feel a lot better about Joe Shane. The guy has done a great job with the Buffalo Bills as their assistant. And if you really look at his track record, you'll know he had an awful lot to do with their rebuild. So I'm really excited to see how this goes.
And considering the situation they've been in with how little salary cap that they have, I mean, there's a point that they had less than $1 million. I think he's done pretty well considering the situation he's been dealt. And, real quick about Daniel Jones, the Giants have to decide by next week about his 5th-year player option, which would it's expected to cost over $22 million. Otherwise, he's going to be playing this season on an expiring contract. And that could be another reason why, you look at next year's draft for a second here, and it is actually supposedly a big quarterback draft. So if you are still up in the air about Daniel Jones, and I'll be honest with you, I still am. I mean, I can't say that I'm done with him, but I also can't say I'm not going to give him another shot because, he's been injury plagued and he's had, a rebuilding team now for several years here. If you are looking into possibly getting another guy, then next year's draft is that draft, and maybe you take that 7th pick and maybe you can get a first one for next year. And if you want to give Dave Gettleman a little bit of credit here, you can actually give him a little bit of credit that the Giants do have the 7th pick because they did not overreact last year after the Eagles traded up to get Devontae Smith, and the Giants were able to trade down, and that's how they were able to get this pick as well as Tony. So that was the one good thing maybe he did in his time here. So I'm excited, though, for Thursday night, and, we will have a special Empty the Bench and Game On draft special here Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. I'll be joining Nick to to go over the draft, and we'll have real-time reaction. I will try not to swear if there's anything bad that happens with the Giants. But, we'll have a special. We'll have a Empty the Bench Game On team show this Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. So stay tuned for that. A lot of good things with the draft, a lot of excitement, and I'm excited that it's here because I don't need to see any more mock drafts, although Tom's mock draft, I say out of everybody's, is the one that I pay attention to the most. So
he has done a lot of analyzing of the draft for years. I'm always impressed with that.
Yeah, and go check out his YouTube videos as well at Big Blue Avenue, and he's got a bunch of good prospect breakdowns. In fact, he's got another one coming out right after our show ends this afternoon. So we'll take a look at that. So switching gears here, Hank, let's get into some NBA discussion because there is a lot to discuss with the playoffs as well. And we have to start local here with the one series that did wrap up last night, and that is the Brooklyn Nets and Boston Celtics. And when we were on the air last week, we were discussing how we thought this series was going to be going 6 or 7 games. I did not think that the Nets were going to fall this much this fast. And before we get into the games itself, we have to discuss Ben Simmons because all the discussion and all the leading into Game 4 last night was that he was going to make his debut for the Nets after they traded James Harden to get him. And then Sunday comes and he says that he awoke with back soreness. And I'm like, well, wait a second. You've been on the bench. You've been sitting on the bench this entire run. And then you wake up and you're dealing with back soreness still. I'm like, oh my gosh, this team is just a flat out mess. I mean, the talent, they have talent, but boy, this team is just an absolute mess.
And then he sits on the sidelines with that weird outfit.
Yeah. I don't get it. I have my own problems with my own team, but this Nets team is just a mess. Whether, it was Kyrie Irving who couldn't play he missed about 90% of the home games this year because of the COVID restrictions, or it was Kevin Durant who couldn't stay healthy, or they trade for James Harden, and then 13 months later they trade him again. They gave up so much not only draft capital, but not only they trade so much draft capital, but they trade so many valuable role players to go get James Harden. And then a year later, they trade him away and they don't get as much capital. And they get, Seth Curry, who's actually been pretty good for them, but Andre Drummond, who, wasn't really that major of a factor. And they get Ben Simmons, who they thought was going to play for them this year. And turns out he didn't play for them this year.
Yeah, that trade. Remember, I said that even though I think the Nets in the long term won that trade, and make no mistake, I still kind of stand by that. Remember, I also talked about this with you guys. I thought they met the Nets very well. Could have lost that trade in the short term just for the sheer fact that they gave up a lot to get James Harden. And I get why they did that. They wanted to make themselves strong to make a deep run, but I can't help but have the feeling that the Nets kind of sold their soul to try to win a championship that year, and it just didn't work out.
I mean, I said this before. The days of the big three in the NBA are done with. You look at all the remaining teams that are in the playoffs right now, there's no big three on any of these teams.
No.
And they traded so many valuable players. I mean, you think the Nets want a Jared Allen or a Karis LeVert back on this team right now? Do you know how valuable those guys would be on this team? Or, I know Dinwiddie, they lost the free agency and stuff, but if you think they want those guys back right now on this team? Now, I also get that Joe Harris only played 14 games this year, but that's also a big blow too, not having a Joe Harris. But you have all this big talent, but the big talent is not on the floor together. In the 13 months that James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Kyrie Irving were on the same team, they only played together 18 times.
That's not enough.
It's not
enough to really develop chemistry.
Well, yeah, and let me get to Steve Nash for a second here before we get into the games. How does any head coach supposed to coach a team when he's having to make a different lineup seemingly every game?
Well, and not to mention, this is a guy who dealt with James Harden quitting, Ben Simmons not even playing at all, and of course Kyrie Irving and his vaccinated saga during the season. So I would play devil's advocate and say that Steve Nash isn't exactly the problem. Not going to tell you that he's a great coach. Far from it. But is it his fault? Nah.
Yeah, and again, I mean, if maybe make, like I've spoken about making LeBron a player coach. Maybe if they think they're better than Nash, maybe make a player coach out of Durant or somebody. But I don't see any head coach being able to survive this kind of drama with this team. And when you look at the series against the Celtics in general, Kyrie has that great game one, but it's all is really forgotten because the only thing we really were talking about him is flipping the bird. And Durant had a good game, but then he had been struggling at times throughout this series. And the Nets, the problem is this team was not built as well for having valuable players if their first two players, Durant and Irving, were taking the majority of the shots and those guys were not being as dominant as they needed to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it's just now, where's the net? Where do the Nets go from here? They've got to stop going after the big name player, and they've got to put a team together like they've had before with all these moves. Because now what's going to happen is you are not going to have your first round pick for most of the next several years because they traded 4 first rounders away to get Harden. So, you're going to have a very tough time developing talent. The window for this team is not as long as people thought it was. And this could be a disaster in the making that could last for years again. Almost very similar to what happened post Pierce and Garnett.
Once again, they sold their soul.
Yeah, and really just a stunning, maybe not stunning that they lost, but stunning that they lost in 4. A clean sweep at the hands of the Celtics. And I think we kind of underestimated the Celtics. I mean, they were a 2 seed for a reason. Jason Tatum is an absolute stud. I mean, he's the star. And, Robert Williams being back helps. I mean, they've got valuable players. They're ones that they're able to make their free throws. That's another thing, too. The Nets' free throw shooting in the series was just, oh, my gosh, especially in Game 4 last night. Hard to watch. So it comes down to all the little things. But, Nets are going to have a very interesting offseason going forward. Kyrie's talked about how he wants to come back on this team. Look, the Nets can have him. Like I said, when they got Kyrie the first time, they can have him and they can keep him because he's a good player. He's a very good player, but boy, he is a headache and he is going to cause problems throughout the season.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And to quote what you said about Kyrie Irving on our last episode, I think you and I can agree that we are both very, very, very thankful he did not end up becoming our problem with the New York Knickerbockers. And I'm sure you also would agree with me that we will take no playoffs as opposed to like a year of just barely even making the playoffs, but dealing with his little shenanigans.
Well, we've had that a lot. The couple of times that we made the playoffs in the 21st century, we've been bounced out early, whether it was against the Hawks last year or against the Nets in 03 and 04 when they, were an under 500 team and they got in. I mean, the Knicks, let's be honest, even if you want to take last year, let's take last year as being a very good year because I think it was because of the expectation. The Knicks have had 2 good years in the 21st century.
Yeah, that one and then 2013. That's pretty much about it.
And they could have gone, I don't want to repeat history here, but, J.R. Smith doesn't get suspended, then maybe that series ends up being a little bit different. So, I agree with you. Look, the Knicks have their own problems. I'm not trying to make this a Knick-Net thing because I don't even think of the Nets as the biggest rival with the Knicks. I've always thought of the Celtics. I've thought of the Heat as being a bigger rival. I've thought of the Sixers being a bigger rival, even though the Nets are in division and now in the same city.
And if I were around in the 90s, I would have said the Pacers.
Absolutely, yeah. The Knicks do have – look, I like the direction the Knicks are going in here, but they still need a point guard and they need a star. I know maybe the rumors have been about Donovan Mitchell. I mean, that would be nice, but they still doesn't solve the point guard problem that the Knicks have been lacking and still looking for a very, very, very long time. But I do like the direction the Knicks are going in. The Nets are still going to be good. I mean, I'm not trying to take anything away from them in that, but this team is a mess, and they've now got to figure out, how are they going to complement Kyrie and KD? They tried Harden, but they traded so much capital for him, and then they traded away Harden and didn't really – I mean, they got Curry, but again, what else did they get? What Ben Simmons comes back next year. I mean, what realistically can you get from him now, full season out, and, what can you really get from him?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think Mitchell, they would have been better off trying to sign as a free agent, and that's the other thing about him. I don't know what you'd even have to get rid of in order to get Mitchell. Are you really that willing to mortgage their future? And make no mistake, I'd love to have him on the team, but as you said, they have needed a point guard for probably as long as I've been alive, I would say, because I don't really remember the 99 finals run. I'm in my mid-20s, so
sure.
Yeah.
I mean, really, the one year they really had a point guard was the first year they acquired Marbury.
Yeah, that's true.
But I like the young players the Knicks have. So, I mean, I think the direction they're going in is good. And I was somebody that would not have been against firing Thibodeau middle of the season last year. But at the same time, I think the development of these young players, if Thibodeau can do that, I think having the same coach for a good long period of time helps the young players. I mean, we've seen that in football now. How many times you see head coaches change year over year and how it affects the development of the young players. So I'm happy that he's coming back, and I think the development of the team is there. They just need, they need Randall to come back and really Derrick Rose to be a bench player, be healthy, and, just rebound because the makings are there for the Knicks to actually be good again. So we'll see. We'll have plenty of time as the offseason happens there. But, yeah, just a very, very disappointing run for the Nets here. And they were looking at maybe making a deep championship run, and now it's been, multiple times getting bounced out early with this team. But, a trend here in the NBA playoffs, Hank, have been injuries to key players. And you look at all of these series right now, the Heat and the Hawks going on right now. Kyle Lowry is out with a hamstring injury as the Heat look to wrap up that series. We've spoken about the Nets Celtics, whether it's supposedly the injury to Ben Simmons. But, Robert Williams on the Celtics side, he just came back recently from being out for a while. You look at the Bucks in the Bulls series, Chris Middleton, a very valuable player there, is out with a knee injury. He's hoping to return in a couple of weeks. If the Bucks get past the Bulls, they're up 3-1. The Sixers and the Raptors, Sixers were up 3-0, 3-0, and And now the Raptors have won their last two, and Joel Embiid, possibly the MVP of the league this year. He's dealing now with a ligament injury in his thumb, and he's playing through it. But I think you've seen now these last couple of days that he's been limited in what he can do, and really how effective is he going to be? I mean, yeah, he's a body out there on the floor, but that injury can definitely impact a big player.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, also All-Star Chris Van Vliet, he is dealing with a hip injury there for the Raptors in that series.
Fred Van Vliet.
Fred Van Vliet, yeah. Yep. Did I say Chris? I meant Fred. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I was going to say, Did
I say Chris?
Who is this Chris you speak of?
Somebody I just made up.
Fred. Yeah, no, just like how I mentioned, what was that pitcher? Chris Young.
There was a pitcher named Chris Young.
No, I know. I got Chris Young confused with some other NBA player.
Yes. You're right. Okay. But yeah, so Fred Van Vliet is dealing with a hip injury for the Raptors. But that series is 3-2 going back to Toronto. And the interesting thing is Thibault can't play in Toronto because of the whole vaccine situation. So I would not be surprised. You look at that series that was 3-0, and we're going back to Philadelphia for a Game 7.
Well, also, here's another thing to consider. Who's the coach of that team? Doc Rivers. Former Knicks legend.
Yeah,
I should point out. And not to mention, what has Doc Rivers been known for over the past decade? Choking away series. I mean, would anyone honestly be surprised if somehow Toronto pulls off the reverse sweep?
Well, if you remember, Doc Rivers is the only coach in NBA history to blow a 3-1 series lead.
That would be hilarious, actually, if Toronto pulled off the reverse sweep.
I mean, that would be unbelievable. I mean, he won't survive that, Doc Rivers. He'll be thrown.
Oh no, he's going to be like in Philadelphia. He's going to get hung.
Oh, it's bad. Yeah, I mean, we already know he's thrown 3 series of 3-1. Not just 1 or 2. He's thrown 3 of them. So, I mean, if he blows a 3-0 series, oh my gosh, I mean, we may never hear the end of it out of there. But yeah, so we got injuries in that series. The Suns and Pelicans out in the West, probably one of the more exciting series so far. I mean, they've all been exciting, but this one is definitely very, very interesting because, we've talked about, I said on the show last week how I thought the Suns had a golden chance to go to the finals out of the West. And now all of a sudden the series is tied against the Pelicans, who are playing with house money here, tied at 2. And they're big star Booker. And supposedly he is improving, but he's still not cleared to come back yet. I mean, hamstring injury is very, very tricky. And that's a big deal. And you've seen it there. Phoenix, not the same team without him.
Yeah, no, that's – and if Chris Paul gets injured again, then they're really screwed. Because we've seen his injury history. And like I said the last time, I said they're really lucky he used up that injury early in the season because it seems like every single time, whether it be with the Rockets, whether it be with New Orleans, and now with the Suns, like if he – like, he's had bad luck with injuries.
Yeah, and at certain points, too, late in the season, playoffs, like you said, and this time before the year, during the season with the thumb. But fortunately, he's back. But that's a big deal, though, Devin Booker being out. And you've seen that right now. And the Pelicans, really, a team that started 1-12 this year. I mean, they got in from the play-in tournament. I mean, like I said, there's really no pressure on them. All the pressure right now is on Phoenix in that series at a best of 3. And you haven't really seen an 8-1 ever happen. So this would be amazing if they could pull this off. I think the Suns still are going to pull this out, but it may take 6 or 7 games to get this done.
Yeah, I think so too. But they're going to have a tough time with the Dallas Mavericks or the Utah Jazz, especially the Mavericks if Luka Doncic returns and is healthy.
Yeah, we'll get to that series in just a moment. The Grizzlies and the Timberwolves, another very interesting series tied at 2. And how about in Game 3, the Grizzlies overcoming a 26-point deficit against the T-Wolves to win, and that series is tied at 2. And you know what? The T-Wolves did bounce back in Game 4, and that just goes to show you with Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards, a good young team there, showing some resiliency and coming back. But I still think the Grizzlies at the end of the day are going to make it because I do like them with John Morant, who did win Most Improved Player. I think they're gonna pull this out, but you know what? Timberwolves not making it easy on them.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And not the Timberwolves. The Grizzlies are a pretty deep team too. So I think ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the stronger team usually wins out in this series. They're going to close out, but I figured if there was any team that was going to be a tough matchup for them because of the Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns combo, it was probably the Timberwolves.
Certainly. Warriors and Nuggets. The Nuggets won Game 4 to avoid a sweep, but the Warriors still have 3-1 in that series. I think that series will wrap up real soon, and I think Golden State will advance. It's crazy to think the Warriors are a 3 seed because of how they started, but they had a tough middle of the season, and then Curry went down for a while, and Klay Thompson came back this year off missing pretty much 2 years because of multiple injuries. But I still do like Golden State to get past that one. I think that one will wrap up really, really soon. And then, like you were saying, the Mavs and the Jazz, this has been another one that's been fascinating so far because Doncic missed the first couple of games coming off that sprain. And now Donovan Mitchell hurt his hamstring, and he's going for an MRI. From the Jazz perspective, as the Mavs lead 3-2 in that series. So some big-name players, again, battling injuries.
Not good. Not good. Now, by the way, let me get back to you about the Warriors series for a bit before I get into the Mavs series. So The Warriors, I think, are the team. And I said this even before Steph Curry got hurt. I thought they were the ones that would have had the best shot at taking down the Phoenix Suns going into the playoffs. And I think for me, that will be interesting to see if those teams can somehow meet in the conference finals. But then again, obviously, we know about the Suns' injury luck right now. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, the Utah Jazz, I thought they were going to win this series at the beginning because you knew that the Mavericks without Luka would be really tough. But now, though, with Mitchell out, this is going to be really rough. And Johnny, I got a question for you, and here's a really, really hot question.
Sure.
Do you think if the Utah Jazz end up losing this series, Quinn Snyder gets on the hot seat and could ultimately get fired? Because I've heard that as a possibility.
It's certainly possible. I think there are coaches that are going to be on the hot seat even throughout this postseason. I think he could be one. Obviously, like I mentioned before, I think Doc Rivers, if he blows that 3-0 lead against the Raptors, I think he certainly could be out there, especially when you hear about the openings out in LA with the Lakers and other openings in the league as well. Yeah, it's possible, Hank. I wouldn't put that past you.
And not to mention, I think it's a possibility because Utah, while they've had decent teams over the past half decade, they've often struggled in the playoffs. In fact, they haven't even made it to the third round. Maybe it could be they need a new voice. Who knows? But it is a possibility that I heard brought up, and it's something that in a vacuum, it seems like it could be a mistake. But then again, who knows? Maybe from what I've also heard, Quinn Snyder seems like a guy that could be really difficult to play for after a while. So who knows?
The problem the Jazz have had, though, for years is that the Western Conference seems to always be the more loaded conference, whether it's been for a while, the Warriors, even the Lakers for a while. You're starting to see that shift now start to even itself out. You're even starting to see the East now be a little bit more loaded than the West is. But the Jazz for years have been dealing with a very, very powerful Western Conference. We've seen teams in the Eastern Conference make the playoffs being under 500. And in the West, you're over 500 and you're the 7th or 8th seed. So that's been part of the problem, too. Like you said, I don't think they've been able to take the next step. But part of that is because, teams like the Warriors and, the Suns and for a time the Lakers and even, way back then the Blazers, all these teams were just so good that it was hard to do. The Warriors, one of the reasons why their success has been this long, besides the fact, Steph Curry and stuff, is that they've had this core, whether it's been Curry, Thompson, Draymond Green, together for a while. And you don't really see that a lot in sports where you have a core star players staying together.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. I agree.
That's why you really don't see – it's hard to see teams repeat in any sports because their core players don't really stay together. A lot of that has to do with free agency and stuff. But
and speaking of teams repeating – Milwaukee Bucks are up 3-1. They've had two pretty convincing wins even after the loss of Chris Middleton. Now, make no mistake, I still think the Bucks are a threat because as long as Giannis is healthy, they're in good shape. Giannis in my honest opinion, I think right now at this point, Giannis is the best player in the NBA. But I think the big question is, can the Celtics give them a run for their money in the second round? Because look, watching that first round series against the Brooklyn Nets, I think the Celtics can absolutely give them a tough one in the second round. I see that one possibly ending in no less than 6 or 7 games, assuming obviously they close out the Bulls, which I think they will.
Yeah, and that was part of the thing too. The Nets, to me, didn't match up well against the Celtics or the Bucks. So if they were going to land against either of those teams, I think they were going to go out in the first round anyway, and that's
True.
what happened. But yeah, no, I mean a Celtic Buck series definitely has 6 or 7 games written all over it,
especially with Middleton out, because Middleton's like a really good right hand man for Giannis.
Yeah, that's the thing, and you saw that last year that Middleton made some big shots for them as well. Now they're saying that he's hoping to return in 2 weeks, so he could possibly be back for a second round series if they are able to close out against the Bulls, which I think they will. But yeah, no, I agree with you. Giannis needs another player, and you've actually been seeing that. You saw Grayson Allen actually score 27 against the Bulls.
On fire.
Yeah, and I'm not a big Grayson Allen fan, and it's not because of his game; it's because of his antics.
Me neither. I hated what he did at Duke.
I hate what he did at Duke, and I don't think Duke ever came down hard with him, and I don't think the NBA came down hard on him when he had that incident against Alex Caruso earlier in the season. I was saying that let's see if the NBA does something that the NCAA couldn't do, and they really didn't. They gave him a 1-game suspension, and sometimes players don't learn because you don't make them learn. But yeah, Grayson Allen, have to be fair though. I mean, his play on the court has been very, very good, and he's been helping fill in for that void that Middleton has been leaving for the Bucks.
Yeah, definitely. But,
the one problem I have with the NBA playoffs, besides the fact that my Knicks are not in it, is these series they take forever. I mean, I feel like we've been talking about the playoffs for 3 or 4 weeks now, and we're still only 5 games into these series at most.
And only one series has ended.
Yeah, that was the one we least expected. Exactly. Yeah, it just goes to show you that we make predictions, but that's why you got to play it out, right?
That's basketball, Johnny.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a nice. That voice is a nice way to transition here, and you know what will be nice is when we're here for episode 8 next week, which will be in May. We'll start including the hockey playoffs, and then we'll probably be in the second round. Yeah, the Rangers will probably be playing next Tuesday night. We'll see. The schedule comes out probably Sunday or so, right? Because the last day of the season.
I cannot wait to go to that game. Madison Square Garden is going to be it's going to be like a rock concert when I go there. It's going to be fun. I can't wait.
And you know what? As great as that is, I'll say real quick, the thing you got to do too is also hang out around the Garden. You have the buses go around. I mean, hopefully they'll still be able to do that with, COVID's.
Oh yeah, I remember the blue tents those years where they made those deep runs.
Absolutely, and hockey playoffs will start next week, and we'll definitely do a nice deep dive into the Rangers series and the Stanley Cup playoffs as well. It's just so weird that the NBA playoffs have been starting before the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'm still trying to get used to that, but. Yeah, we'll definitely spend a lot of time on the Rangers. I mean, the Eastern Conference, the teams are all set, but now it's just the seeding. But this is the last week of the season. We'll have our matchups for next week, and we will definitely do a deep dive into the Rangers and the Stanley Cup playoffs next week as well.
Absolutely. You know damn well I cannot wait. My anxiety is going to be through the roof that week. It's going to be awesome.
It's a lot of fun. And I'll say this: the Stanley Cup playoffs will keep you on the edge of your feet.
Yep.
The entire run, unlike these NBA playoffs, which you really don't have to tune into until the last couple of minutes of each game. But yeah, Stanley Cup playoffs get going next week. We'll definitely do a deep dive on them on episode 8 as well. But Hank, just to wrap up the show here real quick, let's spend it congratulating and discussing a milestone here as Tigers DH Miguel Cabrera became the 33rd player in history to reach the 3,000 hit mark. A very, very cool feat for a very good player, maybe underrated. Maybe I was underrated. An excellent player that we've seen in our lifetime.
Oh my gosh, it's absolutely unreal. Johnny, I don't know about you, and I hate really comparing legends of different eras, but I would have to say, and I don't know if this is a stretch or not, you can dispute me on that.
Sure.
Miggy might very well be the closest player in my lifetime for me to having seen Ted Williams, because he's by far one of the best, if not the best pure better hitters in my lifetime. I remember very well his prime. He would consistently be hitting at or around, like, say, 315, 320. He would hit like 30, 35 home runs, which is ironic because he never really considered himself the true home run hitter. And he'd always have roughly 110, 120 RBIs. Absolutely amazing. And he was the one guy in that lineup. Much like other players, he's one guy that I just was never comfortable seeing Yankee pitchers like pitch to. And I'll tell you about my favorite memory of Miguel Cabrera a little bit later, although I wouldn't really call it my favorite. But let me give you a bit of fun facts for you, if I may.
The Hank fun fact, absolutely, go for it.
So Jason,
there it is. You got your own
yep.
chart, man. I love it.
So we mentioned the Jason Stark article where he talked about like how unique Miguel Cabrera is in a lot of the different categories. So we know that he's one of very few players to be part of both the 3,000 hit club and the 500 career home runs club. And I believe the only other players in that club are Hank Aaron, A-Rod, Albert Pujols, Rafael Palmeiro, and Eddie Murray. And the even more impressive part about him being in that list is there are two guys that we don't know will even be in the Hall of Fame at all because of PED usage. And then not to mention, here's another one for you. Unless Miguel Cabrera does not get a hit in his next 350 at-bats, he will join these two players as the only guys to get 3,000 hits and 500 home runs. Are you ready?
Yep.
Hank Aaron and Willie Mays.
Yep.
And then last but not least, he is the only player to have 3,000 hits, 500 home runs, and a triple crown, plus a 300 career batting average.
Yep. I knew that. Actually, that is something I did know because I did my homework because I did a Monty moment about that on Saturday when he reached his 3,000th hit. Yeah, Hank, I mean, this is, you know what's been great about this? This has been consistency for 20 years with Miguel Cabrera. I mean, we saw him come up as a 20-year-old kid back in 2003. His first hit in the majors was a home run. A walk-off home run, nevertheless. And, you know, we saw what he could do back in the 2003 World Series when the Yankees were taking on the Marlins. Cabrera's been as consistent as they come. And, you know, in this day and age when we seem to not really be valuing batting average as much as we should, he was as pure a hitter as I have ever seen in my 31 years on this planet, for sure. And again, you know, it's been 20 years of this now. In the last couple of years, you know, he's been injury plagued, but he's still been putting up unbelievable numbers. You know, his Triple Crown season in 2012, I mean, he had years of 300 plus for several years now. So,
you know, it's amazing. He almost had a back-to-back Triple Crown because 2013 he was having probably just as good of a season, if not better, at one point. But then he ended up like hurting his leg, and he kept playing through it. But I think that kind of slowed down his numbers, and ultimately, I think it was the home run title that he ended up losing out on. But he still had back-to-back batting crowns for sure.
Yeah,
and I feel like if he was healthy, they probably would have won that World Series. But in any event, he was absolutely amazing. And another thing to consider about Miguel Cabrera, look at where the Tigers were before he made the team. Like, yeah, they had that 2006 pennant run, but other than that, like, they had a lot of losing. I think Miggy, in addition to becoming one of the faces of the franchise, he helped make them powerhouse for the first like half of the 2010s.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, they had him and then Maglio, and then also there were years with J.D. Davis before he became a big name player. They had other guys as well, but I mean, Miguel was the
J.D.
guy.
Martinez, you mean?
Yeah, J.D. Martinez.
J.D. Davis.
Wow, I'm thinking of the Mets because they've been off to a great start this year. Yeah, J.D. Martinez. You know, they've had other guys as well, but you know, Miggy's been the guy that you've wanted to avoid this whole time. And look, they're still trying to avoid him. I mean, the Yankees were intentionally walking him last week, and it came back and backfired. But yeah, no, for sure. What's that?
Speaks volumes.
For sure, yeah.
But speaking of which, the moment that I wanted to bring up that I'll never forget with Miguel Cabrera.
Oh, yes, please do.
Remember that 3-game series against the Yankees? I believe it was August of 2013 during Mariano Rivera's retirement. The only time Mariano had back-to-back blown saves in back-to-back appearances were the games where he gave up home runs to Miguel Cabrera. And if that wasn't enough, if that was just Miguel Cabrera hitting home runs, it would still be impressive considering it was off Mariano. But the fact of the matter was, he hit both of those home runs off Mariano on one leg. That's
I
pretty
remember
damn
that,
impressive.
yes.
And what's even crazy is the Yankees somehow found ways to win those games. So I remember one of them, Brett Gardner, to walk off home run. But yeah, that's one memory of Miguel Cabrera that stands out for me the most. That series in August where he had those big home runs off Mariano Rivera. Because two Hall of Famers, like, not too often you get to see a matchup like that in the ninth inning.
The crazy thing is it's rare to see a player get to 3,000 hits. Only 33 players now have done this, but it's even more rare to have somebody have 3,000 hits and then all the accolades, like you had mentioned in your fun fact. The 500 home runs, the 600 doubles, the Gold Glove, the bat. Yeah, I mean not the batting title, the Triple Crown. It's been incredible. I mean, you look at some of the averages that he's finished with from really 06, 339 and 320, 324, 328, 344, 330, 348, 313, 338, 316. I mean, that was, really from 2005 to 2016. I mean, he was hitting almost 300 or just about every single year.
Mm-hmm.
So, and, he's had, MVP awards, it's just really, really incredible. And he's been doing this pretty much consistently for 20 years. So when he does decide to retire, we're going to see him in Cooperstown, and I think we're going to see him first ballot Cooperstown. That's how special the player he is. What's that?
Him and Pujols both. By the way, there is one other fun fact I forgot to give you.
Go ahead.
He and Pujols are the only players to have 3,000 hits, 500 home runs, and over 600 doubles.
Yeah, it's amazing. And the discussion after Miggy got his 3,000th hit was who will be the next guy to get to 3,000? Because you look at the list right now, and it's kind of difficult, and especially in this day and age when we don't see many players consistently hitting for a high average, and not really, and getting hurt and missing games and not really playing the full seasons. I mean, Cabrera was able to do this also because he had seasons from I'll give you from 2004 to 2014, right?
Mm-hmm.
Playing between 148 and 161 games. I mean, he's 160, 158, 158, 157, 160, 160, 150, 161, 161, 148, 159. He had a 119 and 15, and then in 16 he had 158. It's tough because you always see these guys. You see a lot of players taking more days off. So, pretty much playing every day for that long a period of time. And I know the last few years have been a little different, but it still hasn't taken away from the fact of how consistent of a player he's been throughout his career. And I don't know when we're going to see 3,000 again. You and I and even Nick were having this discussion on Monday, and we don't know really who the next guy to hit the 3,000 mark is. I mean, the closest guy I think right now is Robinson Cano, and unfortunately, he's going to be painted with an asterisk because of the multiple drug suspensions.
I'm going to say the same thing that I said to both you and Nick a couple days ago. I think the next guy to get 3,000 hits might be in kindergarten, and that might be a nice way of me saying it probably won't happen for a very, very long time.
Yeah, I mean, you might have a better chance of seeing perfect games in baseball from pitchers before 3,000 hits happens. So I think you got to soak this all in and really look at how amazing this has been with Cabrera, and enjoy this Hall of Fame career because one thing also, and I think one of you guys had mentioned this too. Cabrera played in the beginning, at least, of his career. He played in a time when steroids was still a predominant topic and discussion, and his name was never linked to it.
Yeah.
So
because by that point they were already testing the players, and as far as we know, Miguel Cabrera never passed one of those tests. So, or I should say, he never flunked a drug test. So he's never really been in any position to get suspended, and I think you could say the same thing with Albert Pujols. And the reason I would know that is because, I looked at a tweet that a Boston writer said about Big Papi. Sorry if I'm going on a tangent here, but he said that one of the reasons that he knew Big Papi was going to go into the Hall of Fame was because after that anonymous test leaked out in 2003, he pretty much said that Big Papi was tested numerous times after that, and he never once flunked.
Well, I think you know my thoughts about that.
Yeah, no, I know you and I are pretty much like not big fans of that guy, but I'm just saying I think that might have to do with the fact that we've never seen Miguel Cabrera's name linked to PEDs, and thank goodness for that, because he is somebody that I have enjoyed watching a lot. Same with Albert Pujols.
Definitely, and you know what, those two guys for sure, first ballot Hall of Famers, and you know, like I said, it's going to be a while before we see another guy hit the 3,000 hit mark. So take this one all in and enjoy it. And what a career, Mickey! And once again, congratulations, and we'll see you in Cooperstown real soon, like first ballot soon. But Hank, that puts a wrap on episode number 7 of Game On, presented by Knack. That was a lot of fun. So thanks for joining me as always. And again, and we want to thank once again Tom Scavetta from Review and Preview, and your co-host over at Big Blue Avenue for joining us to preview the NFL draft. If you missed that, go back and check out our episode. We'll also have it on YouTube and a separate interview, so you can check that out as well. And folks, once again, programming reminder, this Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern, we will have a special NFL draft show with the Empty the Bench guys and yours truly, part of the Game On here. We'll have a nice coordinated show. We will be reacting in real time to the first round, see what our Giants decide to do. So that's Thursday, 8 o'clock on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. You can find that also on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well. So we will definitely have our reactions to that. And, of course, we will react to the draft and get into more NBA playoffs, more baseball. And, of course, you know, Stanley Cup playoffs start next week, and we'll have that on episode number 8.
LGR.
LGR, that's right. LGR and Big Blue. But Hank, thanks so much for joining me again. Fun show.
Always a pleasure, Johnny.
Absolutely. And folks, of course, we're presented by Knack. Use the code GAME at checkout. Get a free TSA-approved lock with your order for a limited time. Make sure you have that lock in your checkout so you can get that discount. And, of course, make sure to subscribe to Empty the Bench on YouTube. Ring that bell so you never miss an episode. We've got so many great shows coming up and that are here right now. And go back and check. And if I had to make a personal thing, go back and check out Here Now the News, because they had Wink Martindale. No, not the Giants Wink Martindale, but the legendary game show host Wink Martindale on. So that was great as well. But folks, for Hank, I'm Johnny. We will see you on Thursday for the NFL Draft Special, and right back here for episode 8 of Game On next week.